I know what you're thinking. Paden, we haven't heard some horror stories in over a year now. When are you going to bring them back up? And that's what today is. We're going to go over 3 agent horror stories, 3 buyer horror stories. I'm going to give you a little bit of blabbering about them in general. The goal of this is just for people who are looking to buy or sell houses are going to be able to see this stuff and hopefully be able to use it in their experience buying houses to help them more prepared for it. It's also just entertaining. Just meant to be like, oh wow, that situation was super crazy. So my name's Paden on Clancy Fairbanks, the Mountain Buff Real Estate. Let's talk about some horror stories. All right, you want to hear a horror story? Let's jump right on into it with a story from Lincolnberry 42. It was posted about 8 months ago. At my dad's funeral, a real estate agent approached me offering her condolences before saying that she knew my dad was considering selling his lot at a specific location. She handed me her business card. In shock, wow man, how crazy is that? In shock, I mumbled thanks and took the card. My dad had only been dead for a week, and I knew his real plans for the property. He was working with an architect to build his retirement home there to be closer to me and his grandchildren. The agent's attempt to suggest otherwise at his funeral was outrageous. That's a little bit rough. My dad passed away unexpectedly in July of 2022, and I am only now grappling over all the bad actors that came out of the woodwork when he passed. This does happen. Vultures. I have been thinking about real estate agents in our area recently, as I believe highly unethical behavior has taken place in recent years as people were dying during COVID. Alerting investors to grab the properties that might be unclaimed, I couldn't help but notice this particular agent's name came up of fire times and local auctions and trustee sales. Shame, shame. Don't get me started on the current state of real estate market. They say we have a shortage of homes and prices. Homes are way overvalued. I know homes and land are not being bought by individual families, but by rather LLCs that are shell companies that much richer people who are big donors in election campaigns. This is a hard one. 100% real estate agents. I have this problem all the time where people tell me, my family passed away or my dad passed away, we don't know what to do with their house. I 100% my thought process on it is if it doesn't feel right to talk about it, then don't talk about it. I don't. If somebody's family passed away, or in your mind you're like, man, they might need help selling their house, I just don't bring it up because it's not worth it, and it makes you feel like a bad person. And real estate agents who do bring it up, maybe it's okay. I don't want to be hard on them and say that they're terrible real estate agents, terrible people, because it's all contextually about the situation. Quite possibly, if the agent had known the dad really well and had said, hey, I need you to sell this house immediately after I pass away so they can use this money to be able to pay for my funeral costs, that's a much different situation. And you would imagine a real estate agent would have some form of ground of being like, hey, I got to bring this up because your dad told me to bring it up. But this situation, no, probably not. Terrible, 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 terrible. But that is just real estate and the way that it kind of goes. Real estate attracts the worst kind of people in the world. Let's go to agent story number 2. I pulled this off of a news article, and I can link that down below as well. But I had a first-time home buyer with a limited budget. It's very common, very realistic that a first-time home buyer is going to have a limited budget. And we found a small Cape Cod that was completely redone from top to bottom and being offered at an incredible price. This home showed like brand new. New drywall, doors, windows, roof, carpeting, kitchen, and baths. My clients were so excited that they ran upstairs while I stayed on the first floor, critiquing the home and wondering why the sales price was so low. While standing in the dining room, I heard a woman's voice in the kitchen say, I'm in here. Startled, I went to the kitchen to see who it was, and no one was there. The voice came again, I'm in here. I was so freaked out that I yelled for my clients to get ready to go. Of course, they wanted to make an offer, so I pulled the seller's property disclosure statement. Added onto the last page was a newspaper article that read, Husband killed wife in kitchen and lit the home on fire. I still get chills to this day, and no, my clients decided not to make an offer. This is another one of those ones that's like, I've been in a house before that I felt like was haunted. It just gave me the heebie-jeebies. You go in the cellar, it's got like the brick walls or the rock walls and stuff like that. It's 4 stories. It's everything that you kind of expect like an old haunted house to look like, and you just to get really bad vibes from it. I'm sure that this would freak people out, and interesting enough, it's actually state to state if you have to disclose if somebody passed away in it or if there's been paranormal activity in the house before. But just interesting to see and super freaky. And I can tell you when you go into a house that you believe has paranormal activity, there is a different feeling to it. So great, interesting story, and I'll click link this in the. I will link this below in the description. Next, we're going to the next buyer horror story, and I think this is an interesting one just in general. Whatever you do, do not use, I'll black that out in the thing, as your buyer's agent. She does not look out for your best interests as a buyer, demands you put down more earnest money than you need to, doesn't even bother to ask to extend the due diligence period, and discourages the most basic of negotiation and refuses to advocate or negotiate anything for you at all. Not sure if it is laziness or just wanting to keep the sales price as high as possible to get her commission a few dollars higher. I couldn't even get her to fix all the plumbing that needed repairing, as she only meekly asked the sellers to repair one leak. When there was several plumbing issues she was supposed to get fixed while the plumber was out there. Anyways, it was like she was working for the sellers more than for me. Oh, that's a terrible feeling. At closing, she went on and on about herself and how easy it was working with the seller's agent. Yeah, I guess it was, since Estrella, sorry, I'll black out that name, did not bother really working for me. Her own client, it's called ethics violation as well. Oh yes, blank, claims the broker at this location helped her and approved her terrible representation of me every step of the way. So if true, that means the fish rots from the head, and I was not impressed with either one of the broker's responses. When I called to talk about my bad experience with blah blah blah, I couldn't say a lot more, but I'll save that for the real estate commission. This is a hard one because even if this agent did a phenomenal job, if she didn't communicate why things were happening, or she didn't make sure that the buyers were comfortable with it, or it let them know that they could back out and keep their earnest money according to some states before specific deadlines, she just maybe just did a bad job. I don't know. Once again, we don't know the full context of this. I'm not. She could have worked her absolute butt off, and then the client just had a bad experience, or not. Maybe she is a terrible agent. The hard thing about real estate is nobody really remembers the transaction, the nuanced pieces of it, the specific earnest money, when it was returned, even closing. People always remember the emotions that they had when they were buying and selling a house. And that's a huge piece of what real estate agents should focus on is how do you feel about this purchase? Are you still feeling okay about it? Because even if she did a phenomenal, amazing, great job, if the clients felt bad about it, they will always remember that, and they will always remember that about her. Hard situation. I can tell you that I am sometimes timid about negotiating, and I need to be more aggressive about it in general. And it's not that I worry about the deal falling through, but you just don't want to rustle too many feathers because you don't want to get a bad taste in everybody's mouth. But to be honest with you, it's probably better to get a bad taste in everybody's mouth and make sure that your buyer feels represented, feels like you're aggressively going for what they're looking for, over not trying to rock the boat too much to make sure that the deal kind of stays moving forward. In your mind, you try to justify and say, I'm trying to help my buyers out. These are smaller issues, but it's not your choice if they're small issues or not. It's your buyer's choice. So, lessons there for me to learn as well. Take that as you will. Then we're going on to agent number 2. We are not going through these very quick, so I apologize about that. But okay. So, is a veteran Caldwell Banker agent? This is another news article one. During the Great Recession of 2007-2009, she listed a home for an older couple who was downsizing and moving to the Sun Belt. The market was weaker there then, but after a few months, they accepted an offer. The buyer asked whether the sellers would include the fancy new washing machine and dryer in the sale, and the sellers agreed. Tobin said, "Cool, awesome, Nito Cabino." So we finally get to the closing day, and we do the final walkthrough. Afterward, I locked it up. We're all driving to the closing, and the other agent called me and said, "Sandy, that washer dryer is not the same is not the same washer dryer." I was only 5 minutes away from the house, so I turned around and went back, and sure enough, there were another washer dryer, scratched and dented and held together with duct tape. Tobin was mortified. The sellers had left the state and weren't going to be at the closing, so she informed their attorney of the situation. The attorney called one of the sellers, and the seller doubled down, yelling on speakerphone that it was the laundry set they agreed to leave. The attorney, who had known the seller for a long time, took Tobin into a private conference room and asked her whether the machines were the same one the sellers had agreed to leave. She confirmed they weren't, and the attorney negotiated a fair price reduction on the behalf of the owner's behalf. Thankfully, the buyers bought the house. This is another one of those things that when you're doing your final walkthrough, take your camera and take a video of it, because that final walkthrough, the purpose of it is to say, hey, I accept the condition of this house. If as long as it's in this exact condition, we're good to go. It gets a little complicated when you have stuff on the wall and they're still moving out and stuff like that, but at least you have something. At least you have a video of something. Because I can tell you this happens more often than you think. Sellers saying one thing, or sellers leaving the house in a bad shape, or sellers not doing what they say that they're going to do. And it makes it so much easier when you have some kind of video evidence showing that things have changed. Even in the contract, being specific on washer and dryer, okay, what's the brand of the washer? What's the brand of the dryer? It's all dependent on the seller. It's all dependent on the mood of the general deal and all of that. But the more evidence you have, the more emails that you have, the better it's going to be. They got lucky that this all kind of shook out okay and a price reduction, but sometimes it doesn't. And it's one of those things too. Let's say that the sellers just never brought that back and they didn't want to play ball at all. Washer and dryer combined is $3,000. So you try to take them to small claims court. Even if you win, $3,000 is right on that brink of possibly worth it, possibly not. But it's a huge hassle. And there's so much gray area in real estate that it makes it really hard. So hopefully your sellers are good, kind to work with. Hopefully they're honest. Make sure that you're keeping all that documentation and pictures to prove it if you have to. Are going to end it on one last guy. Okay. After moving out of a townhouse and spending an entire day scrubbing every surface and doing the lot, leaving it sparkling and better than we found it, I hand the keys in and go on to my next house 1 hour's drive away. Next day, I get a phone call from real estate agent. You didn't leave it in satisfactory condition. There's some dust in the kitchen drawer underneath the cutlery drawer tray. If you want your bond back, you need to come and pick up the keys and clean it. I assume bond is like earnest money. Maybe. Next day, I drive. Oh, this must just be for a rental. But next day, I drive back to an hour back to the real estate agent, pick up the keys, go back to the house under a tissue, use a tissue to wipe up the literal 3 specks of dirt underneath the plastic cutlery thing, return the keys, and drive another hour home. Half a day and $20 petrol wasted on 3 specks of dirt hidden under a plastic cutlery drawer. This is another hard thing as well. You don't know what the expectation of your buyers are, and sometimes it's just inconvenient. Like some people's opinion of clean and not clean is different. Some people's opinion on what they're saying and how aggressive they are is just totally different. So in real estate, like I probably wouldn't have driven back there and cleaned up those things if that's actually all it was there. It's like, what are you gonna do? This is part of real estate transaction. There's gonna be a little bit of dirt somewhere because somebody's gonna miss something because they're moving. But if they've done in general, 80 or 90% of what they should be doing, and they just made a mistake and missed something, it'd be crazy to make them drive back there. But maybe if there wasn't, it's acting like maybe this is just a rental. And so maybe, they weren't going to get their $500 back. So for them, it's worth driving back. But just the general lesson, it's really, really hard, the expectations being different between a buyer and a seller. But that's all I got for you today. I don't know how long this was. Looks like it was 10 minutes or something like that. If you're watching to this point, comment down below. Comment something. I want you to say, Paden, I watched this video to this point. I thought this story was interesting, and this was my huge problem that I had. If you do have your own story, send me an email, padenfairbanks@gmail.com. I'd love to talk about it. I'd love to comment on it. And I'd love to just have it on my channel. Other than that, subscribe, like, all those things help. If you're looking to buy or sell a house in Utah, southeastern Idaho, or southwestern Wyoming, let me know. And thanks for watching. Have a great day. Bye.